All right. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Springs Time. I'm Tyler Springs, and it's great to be with you this evening as we debate all things sports wise from the Memphis perspective. But we'd like to expand that a little bit to the American Conference at large, and sometimes the NBA, sometimes the NFL. Depends on just the direction we go and what the taste of the day news is. So, today, we're going to spend some time on American Conference basketball, mostly on the women's side, but we're going to touch on the men a little bit and maybe do a little college hoops discussion. We'll see. We'll just see what we get into because we got a special guest named Pat Strathman, who is part of ESPN Wichita and the voice of Shockers women's basketball and knows things from that side of the aisle. So great to have him on and get a little fresh perspective on the young college basketball season. Both his team, Wichita State, and my team, Memphis, maybe not the strongest of openings to the season, but we'll get to all that. And that also doesn't mean it's going to be, a nonsense type of year. So just looking forward to chopping it up with him and plenty to talk about. And hopefully this will be, one of many conversations on Springs Time going forward that folks will enjoy. So like and subscribe if you like the content and pitch me on future content if you want to do that as well. So with that in mind, I do welcome the radio vet, Pat Strathman. We are both in hotel rooms with, I think, probably the same interior decorator.
I was just gonna say, we can't play this any better. This is perfect.
I won't tell people. I won't tell anybody where you are. But people could probably guess where we are based on schedule. But you're in a Marriott brand hotel?
Gosh, is it bad? I don't really know.
No, it's the same no matter what, isn't it?
Only I care about, Tyler. It's like, and by the way, great to be here. But like, the only thing I care about is a bed and a shower, right? And I don't care where it is. I don't care how fancy it is. I don't need a gigantic suite. Just get me to a spot where I can actually just lay my head down and get a fresh shower. That's it. That's the only thing I need. So I'm very, very basic.
Hey, we'll take the basics, especially. I don't think I'm breaking any news here, but Pat being a dad recently for the second time, you get fewer and fewer nights like this one to yourself, right? Where it's clean, it's quiet, and that's nothing to say anything bad about family. But we know, being dads of youngins, the unbroken stretches, fewer and far between sometimes. So you're right, like a fresh warm bed, a hot shower, and a little R&R, a little peace and quiet does a body good.
Yeah, and we were on the bus, and my wife calls, and it's the usual, all right, good night, that type of thing. When she called, it wasn't that. It was two screaming kids, a 2-year-old and a 1-month-old. 1-month-old, of course, just wanting one thing, and that's food. The toddler having some sort of feelings over something because that's what toddlers do. So I felt so bad for her. But we've been so fortunate here at the beginning where this one has been different. Emma's been different than Grace. Grace, when she was at this age, she would just cry and cry and cry, and you really didn't know why. For Emma, it's so much different. It's very two things: food, or she has a dirty diaper. That's it. And once you do one of the two things, she's a pretty happy camper. So we've actually been blessed with two kids that have been really good at sleeping. But Emma has been even more of a chill baby than Grace, which I didn't think was even possible. So any parents that are watching right now, I'm not trying to rub that in because I know what it's like to be in the trenches, taking grenades, just trying to get a little bit of sleep. But fortunately, in the Strathman household, we've been all right. So it's been amazing. But 1 to 2, it's definitely a jump. But it's been a fun one. We're still playing man to man. We're not playing zone. If we were playing zone, it'd be a different story. But man to man, we'll take man to man defense right now.
As my basketball coach friend and one-time groomsman said to me the other day, when it's not going from zone to man to zone. It's going from man trap to man and then to zone. So you're officially in man to man. Congratulations. And since you brought it up and you're kind to talk about it, I'm going to just throw in this random nugget. I don't know if you're a fantasy football guy, but I used to be a fantasy football guy. I quit because I was not good at it. And I wasted too much time on it. I still listen to fantasy football podcasts on occasion, and one of them, I'll just shout out the Ringer Fantasy Football Podcast, which I find to be hilarious on a regular basis. They recommend, one of the guys on there is a dad, and he for the longest time has said, if you need just something in the moment to get a young one quiet, he said there's this one song called Misty Mountains from The Hobbit. And if you look at that song up on Spotify, it's very guttural. It's very like sort of like, it sounds like monks kind of, but it's very like a peaceful making type of song. And he said it's worked for his kid. And people keep emailing that show and be like, it worked for my kid. It worked for my kid. It worked for my, So in case that helps Mama Strathman, she can hit the Spotify with Misty Mountains, and it might help.
I'll jot that down. She's a fan of Lord of the Rings anyways. Like all that stuff is pretty much over my head because I watched it a long time ago, but I know The Hobbit should be that's right up her alley. So I'll have to make that suggestion. There's one song called The Happy Song. Just do that. The Happy Song is usually what works for us. It's scientifically proven that it will make anyone happy. And when you're driving down the road on a highway, still got another 90 minutes to go, and you need everyone to just be quiet, just put on that song and listen to it for 90 minutes, and it tends to be okay. But I'll definitely put that one down, though, for sure.
Yeah, feel free, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you're right. I don't know what we all did before 2016 when the Happy Song came out. I don't know how our parents got us here. We'll take it. Speaking of youngsters and those unproven, we walk into a fresh basketball season. Obviously, everybody's got great hopes for the year to come. Some of those hopes are green lighted on day one. Some less so. Some sort of like take their time going from crawl into walking, or maybe crawl into cruising, and then trying to walk. I think it's been, to say the least, I would say a crawl to walk start for Memphis and for Wichita State on the women's side, because they have not come out like gangbusters. And they're, let's be honest, those are two teams, that obviously we care about. But Alex Simmons looking to get some stability, some success, some traction. I think Terry Nooner looking to get some stability, some traction, some success. And Rome's not built in a day. But a lot of newness on both sides, right? Those are two rosters that have a ton of new faces on there, looking for new contributors, looking to kind of see who gets established early on, who can be relied upon early on. In the games that you've done so far, obviously, the record is what it is, but tell me who you've liked, or tell me just sort of like the snippets of good that you've seen, because that's what we always try to look for, even if there's an L on the card. Like what went well today, right?
Yeah. Well, in the Northwestern State game, the most recent one, you can hang your hat on defense. I think that in itself was good, because even though the offense had just a woeful day, defensively it was there against Northwestern State. Now, give credit to what they did. They get shellacked by Nebraska in the first game of the year. Wichita State destroys Lincoln from the Division II ranks. So you have one team feeling pretty confident, the other team going, man, I'm angry. We got to change this. And Northwestern State came out with a ton of energy and just took one big swing and made a connection. And it's a new roster who, from what I can tell, has gelled pretty well, but you don't get tested in the offseason. You get tested when you have the actual challenges right in front of you. And for this team, we'll see how they respond here before too long. But in the game against Northwestern State, they're down by 18 in the first half. And everyone's like, oh, my gosh, what's going to happen? Well, the final 4-10, they hold Northwestern State without a point. The downside is you only get 5 points down the stretch to close out the half. If you double it and turn it into a 10-0 run, I mean, it's still a deficit you have to face, but I think mentally it changes things going into the locker room, and then you have a different confidence coming out of the locker room. So, yeah, in the first couple of games, it's crazy, Tyler, and this is the new day and age of college basketball where you're getting used to seeing rosters just turn over. And for Wichita State, Terry Nooner takes over first year. He has to replace 60% of his scoring. Season 2, you have to replace 65% of your scoring. Season 3, 90% of your scoring. And Wichita State doesn't return a single person who made a three for the team last year. Not a single three-pointer made from last year. Now, Wichita State wasn't that great of a three-point shooting team last year, so it's not all dreadful there for Wichita State. You get a fresh opportunity to bring in some new people, and that's the way I view it. And now you look at a Shocker roster, you've replaced 90% of the scoring, and you have a roster comprised of 93% of them being upperclassmen. So you got college experience. You got 44 years of collegiate experience with this roster. You have 8 grad transfers, which ties Louisiana Monroe for the most in Division I here for this year. So it's a roster that's very mature, but it's also a roster that just has to feel each other out for a little bit. Against Northwestern State offensively, you saw pass, and stand. You see an offense that turns the ball over right off the bat, and the majority of those turnovers were not live ball. They weren't caused by the defense. It was just simple execution of screens and not being able to get your feet set. So they really put themselves in a pretty big hole right off the bat against Northwestern State. But what I like most about this team, it is that maturity factor, because just being around them today, just at dinner, just feels different compared to a season ago, where I think you really have a lot of individuals that truly, like each other, and they truly want to play hard for each other. And I think you have some people who are willing to take accountability on this team to look in the mirror and go, hey, we got to get better at this, got to get better at that type of thing. But, so far defensively, I think there's been a lot to like. They bring in Jayla Harding from Wichita native, played at New Mexico State, played at Butler Community College for 2 years before going over to New Mexico State. And she had a rough night shooting against Northwestern State, but give credit to, again, Northwestern State. They said, you're not going to beat us. And if you are, you're going to have to earn every single bucket. And Jayla never really got a ton of clean looks. And when she did, just an off night. But that's a gal who hit 61 threes in each of the last 2 seasons. You bring in 122 three-pointers. And to see another Wichita kid come back home is a big deal for Terry Nooner. And definitely a big deal just for the city of Wichita, because I remember her brother, Jarek Harding, who played at Southeast up at the Topeka Invitational Tournament. That's how old I'm getting, Tyler. I remember watching her brother in high school. And I'm like, I told her that. I was like, you have no idea how old that makes me feel. But Jayla, you just see her shooting. Her shooting capabilities are very much there. They have a point guard in Taya Davis, who's really a facilitator. Yep. They call her Baby Boss because she's not afraid to get after someone, but she's maybe 5'6" on a good day. I don't really know the exact measurements in front of me, but she's one of those individuals that's not afraid to try to drive and get to the rim and then dish it off for an easy bucket around the rim. So I think Taya has been great so far. Abby Cater, she came in with the aspirations of being the conference defensive player of the year. How many players come in and say, hey, coach, I want to be the defensive player of the year in the conference? You almost hear, the only thing you hear is, I want to lead the league in threes. I want to lead the league in points per game. I want to win the player of the year in the conference, offensive player of the year, blah, blah, blah. She came in with this mindset of, no, I want to be the defensive player of the year in the American. And you see her athleticism. She had 4 steals in the first game against Lincoln, didn't get in against Northwestern State, but she had 2 quick fouls, had to sit. And you know how that works, Tyler. You get a couple of fouls and mentally you just feel off for the remainder of the game. You don't feel quite as aggressive as you probably should be. But you can see her athleticism. She does have the stroke to where she can step down and knock down a few as well. So those are 3 newcomers that just jump off the page for me. I can go down the entire roster.
I know you can.
There's no need to probably do that with a brand new roster. But there are some returners, Breon White and Maya Muna Sissoko. Those are the only 2 individuals back with substantial playing time. He did bring back Kylie Ortiz, who played in one game and then suffered an injury for the rest of the year. And then Fiona Jamonde is a guy who had an a preseason injury before the season even started. So I think you're still trying to figure things out probably around the rim with the post players right now. But in terms of what you see from the guards, I think you really have some promise there with Abby, Taya, and Jayla. I think those three are unique. And I think my most favorite part about this team is you really have a little bit of everything. You have those bits and pieces. Jayla is a knockdown shooter. Abby's more a defensive player. Taya's more of a facilitator. Treasure Thompson's very long, transfer from Texas Southern. You have Sophie Benaruga, who comes from Seattle, who
well-traveled, played
well-traveled. She's the European style of play. Her first shot I saw against Linga was a floater. Like what post players do floaters? Like it doesn't happen all too often. So there's a little bit of uniqueness to every player, which I think allows them to sort of morph in some ways to try to exploit some things. But still early, still got to figure out some things, and that's why you saw a loss to Northwestern State, and we'll see what they can do on the road against Western Kentucky, a team who's been pretty darn good for so many years now. 23 wins last year and finished third in Conference USA. They have a wonderful facility, but they also are dealing with what a lot of colleges are dealing with at this level, and that is roster turnover. Just trying to figure out how to replace pieces that you have the last couple of years. That's the name of the game in college basketball.
Yeah. And I was honestly, I heard it on maybe the CBS Sports College Basketball podcast. I don't know. I'm listening to too many of these, Pat. But
you listen to podcasts like a
I try.
I need to get on your level. I just sit down and try to sit in quiet for probably 2 hours.
That's because you're making the see. This is. I worked at a sports radio station. I have worked at sports radio stations before, and I find when I'm working at the station, I don't go home and listen as much because listening is such an ingrained part of your job. You're talking all the time. You don't need somebody else filling your head. You're filling it up as you go day to day. So I get that. So anyway, let me be your lifeline to podcasts. But they said we think men's college basketball, the mid majors have as weak a talent base as it's been in probably the last decade. And I thought about it and I was like, is the same for the women's teams? And I'm not sure yet because the women's teams, the centralization of talent is more so in the top 25 for the women's side, I feel like, than it is, sort of across the board into like the 40s teams in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. But again, like this time of year where you get teams like a Northwestern State or somebody else popping up, is it because that they like the talent has spread from a Power 5 team or someplace like that to lower levels where like those bench players on a Power 5 team can play, right, and make more of a dent? Maybe it is, maybe like the talent flow is going the other direction in some ways for the women's side. I don't know. That's just it's an intrusive thought I had, but
it's an interesting thought though. I think there are just so many things that we're seeing, and we're still just trying to really just figure it all out because it's still very. As much as it feels like we've been dealing this for like 10 years, it's still relatively new. And the only caveat that you throw into it is, what does it look like from name, image, and likeness? What does it look like from dollars to cents standpoint? And I know our jobs, we're not going to dive deep into that stuff. We don't dive deep and ask coaching staffs what's going on there when it comes to that.
They wouldn't tell us if we did. I'm convinced.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody wants to give it away.
Right, of course. But that's another thing you gotta look into as well. It's another factor. So, but I do think it's intriguing because you would think that the most individuals, if you were to ask them a couple of years ago, hey, what's your number one reason to transfer? And almost always it's going to be playing time.
Right.
Let me just get playing time. And I still think that's part of it. I still think that's a major factor. But now you throw in something else, and then next thing you know, it changes a little bit. But I do think you are starting to see some of these other schools though, like in Northwestern State and some of these others that are I think Coach Nims does a fantastic job, and the talent that she had on that roster, very athletic. And I'm looking at like where these gals come from, right. And they also had grad transfers, and And that's the other aspect too. Get someone who's played 3 years at a college and get them to come to your place for 1 year. And if you strike gold on that one individual, it can definitely change the outlook of the entire season. So I think it's interesting to see what women's basketball is going to be like. Again, as you brought up, the whole kind of like the trickle down effect in some ways for college basketball.
Yeah, I'll pull on two strings that you mentioned there, but one was, well, I mean, Memphis seems to be doing the reverse thing, where last year they got all the old kids, and this year they have like a lot of new younger talent who have come like maybe from like a year or two at a Power 5 level. And I think part of the play, like what you're talking about, is they're dealing with the roster churn every year. I think if Alex Simmons can get the buy-in this year, regardless of what the wins and the losses look like, as long as it's better than last year and more cohesive than last year, I think some of these kids who are junior, like sophomores and juniors, come back as juniors and seniors, and I think that's part of how you keep from having to turn over all of your 3-point shooting or 90% of your minutes or whatever it is on a year-to-year basis, because that's I'm sure they're sick of that too in some ways. So that's my hunch. I haven't asked Alex directly about it, but I think being in a good spot breeds being in a good spot. It tends to on occasion. It will, if you play well and you're Jayla Harding or you're Daniela Abies, then you will make the jump from a mid-major to a power level. But a lot of times, you want to stay where you're playing well and getting a lot of the work. The two threads I wanted to pull on, one was, you can tell Abby Cater, I believe it's 4 or 5 years running that the leader in the conference in steals has won Defensive Player of the Year. So the gauntlet is clearly laid down for that category for what coaches think of it. Whether you agree with it or not. And I had a bone to pick last year, but we'll skip that one.
Defensive metrics. Tyler, what's the defensive metrics? Bring in the Ken Palm. Get in
there are. I won't even. We could go in. We'll save that for part 2 of our discussion next month. We'll get Ken Palm on here. But the other thing I wanted to go for was, doggone it, I'm going to lose it now, and I'm going to hate myself for it. What was it? Oh yeah, this is it. Okay, so you were talking about I think it was it Abby or was it Jayla Harding who got in foul trouble, right? And couldn't Abby, right? Have you seen it, or have you talked to any coaches, doing games or just being around different environments where the thinking is starting to change from 2 fouls as an auto bench in the second quarter or early in the first half to where what's the point of saving your best player for the late stage of the game if by the time you get there, because they were on the bench, you're not in a competitive game anymore? And I'm curious if you've heard that discussion said to you independently of me from somebody else you've talked to.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Abby's instance, she picked up those 2 quick ones, and then she was down for the remainder of the quarter. But it doesn't mean she was out for the remainder of the half.
Yeah.
But spoiler alert, she picked up foul number 3 in quarter number 2, and then she had to sit down. So, or at least was, she definitely changed her game because of those 2 fouls.
You saw her do it. You saw it. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. You can just see how different it was. It was now I can't be so aggressive. And, there's different ways to officiate too. I'm not here to talk about officiating. That's not my role. I had someone the other day was just like, you just never get on officials. I'm like, yeah, there's no need, because if you're a player, adjust. If you're a coach, you adjust. Like, that's just now. If it's a close ball game and comes down the very, very end and it's an egregious call, then yeah, by all means we can have that conversation. But you can't tell me you lose by 13 and blame officials. Like, that's just not how this works. At least to me, that's not how this works. But anyways, that's another whole discussion there when it comes to that. But with Abby, I think Coach rolled the dice there in the second quarter to bring her back out. But I think he knew at that point, like, we got to get it out there, because the most important thing that Wichita State needed against Northwestern State wasn't necessarily Abby. It was just someone to come in and bring energy, just to completely change things. And Abby's best quality is bringing energy. That's just the way that she is. She's that individual that will kind of be the Energizer Bunny, just never stops, and you can just see the teammates feed off her energy. When you move back from the equation, then it's with a whole new roster. Again, it's who's going to be that person now? Who's going to be that individual? So you're kind of looking around like, is it going to be you? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be you? So you just didn't see the type of responses as you would want. But I think you're starting to see coaches more and more, and I think it probably varies too on just the situation of the game, right? If you're, if one of your best players picks up 2 quick fouls and you're down by 15, you're probably going to feel the need of like, oh, we need to get her back in there. If you're within 6 or within 8 and there's 2 minutes to go in the half, you're probably like, we could probably hold off a little bit. So situational basketball is probably where I would go when it comes to that. But I'm seeing more coaches just understand, like, let's bring her back out there because what else we got to lose? We're trying, especially early on in the season when you're trying different players, like, okay, your turn, your turn, your turn. If you're not seeing a response, then go back to someone who has given you a response. And I think that's what you probably see coaches do nowadays.
Yeah, I'm with that. And it happened to Tamaya Smith the other day where I think she fouled out in like eight minutes maybe, and it was all like shifts of like a minute 45 seconds in each quarter where just like quick foul, and she was so distraught, because she got back into the game I think with something like under 5 minutes to play, and at that point Memphis is trying to come back against a 12-point deficit, and then she like almost immediately picked up another foul, and you could just tell it just gutted her, and then it ended up they ended up winning in spite of Tamaya and being one of the more impactful players typically, having no points and having no impact on the game at all. But it can't go like that every game, and she knows that, and they know that. So hopefully it's like you said, it's a learning experience, and it's situationally you have to trust Coach Simmons or Coach Nooner or whomever it is, just to do the thing that they're supposed to do. So we'll see what Western Kentucky looks like tomorrow night. Say hi to Big Red, one of my favorite mascots.
What an arena, by the way. That's a really cool arena, but you ain't kidding. Like seeing this what Cookie Monster like thing that's just postered all over the campus. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a real thing, isn't it? Like you hear so much about it. This is a real thing. Okay, here we go.
Not that we're starved for creativity and uniqueness among college mascots, but I would say if you're picking for just for uniqueness, Woo Shock versus Big Red is one of the better early season tilts, I would say. So enjoy that as much as you can. We'll see what Memphis has in store tomorrow. They've got South Alabama, and that's a team that just took down UAB the other day, and they put in, I want to say 15 threes. So, better have your arc defense ready for a team like that. We'll see what Coach Simmons and company bring to the table on that front. On the other side, not that you're necessarily as locked in, but you're a man about the Wichita space. Men's side, Paul Mills starting off decently, right? Like I don't know if like the chatter is hyper positive on them, but I feel like they have been seeing the upward trajectory that people wanted, when they went to Paul Mills coming off of Isaac Brown. That seems like a good start. Am I in the ballpark there? Is that fair?
Well, I would argue, yeah, but it just depends on who you talk to. Like I think fanatics have this way of viewing things in certain ways to support certain claims that they might have. And that's the beauty of sports, right? We all have opinions. You can all make an opinion, and that's sports. That's just it. Like
give me that fanatics claim, because I know you have it, or you can materialize it. What's the Paul Mills sucks? Like, why can nobody be Greg Marshall again? What does that sound like? It sounds like something like that.
I plead the fifth. That's basically how it is. I think there's just you're dealing with a city that had such an incredible ride, multiple years, and it's a city that is still starving for something like that.
Yeah,
and what the challenge is, and And I get it. Like everyone should have expectations and want their team to be good. That's the thing about being a fan, about being an alum. You want your team, your program to be the best ever. You get a taste of a deep postseason run. Guess what? People are going to want to see the deep postseason run again and again and again. But it's really hard to do that now more so than ever before.
It's become harder.
You want to talk about the college women's basketball and maybe the trickle down effect. You look at men's basketball and wonder what happens to the little engine that could in the NCAA tournament. You saw it on display last year where you didn't get the type of magic that normally comes with March. And some people see that and I don't know, like for me, I just go, I think that's just kind of how things change. It's harder. It's really, really hard to go out there and make deep postseason runs where you do have power fours and then everyone else for the most part. So, but when I look at the men, the way that they started, you want to think that 90% of scoring is a lot to replace. I'm almost positive that for Wichita State men's basketball, it's like 0.01%. Like it's pretty. It's like they have to replace the entire squad, and I thought Paul Mills did a pretty good job of building the roster. He brings in Kenyon Giles from UNC Greensboro, and you can tell right away that he's a player. He is a prototypical Paul Mills point guard who's undersized, but he knocked down 5 threes in the first half against Prairie View A&M. When Wichita State was struggling against UNC Asheville, wasn't pretty, but when Wichita State pulled away, it was because Giles was starting to make some jumpers. He said, all right, my time to shine. We got 5 minutes left. It's time for me to start taking over. And guess what? He took over, started making those jumpers that were just incredible. And you look at him, you're like, okay, there's a little bit of Shocker fans will know this with Tyson Etienne. There's a little bit of Tyson Etienne with him, but I would argue that his mid-range game is definitely more solid than what Tyson was back in the day there for Wichita State. You lose Quincy Ballard in the middle, who made 70+% of his shots. You bring in Will Berg, who I think is not Quincy Ballard. I can tell you that. He's not Quincy Ballard. He's a unique piece, though, who transfers from Purdue, who had a chance to learn under some pretty impressive post players up there with Matt Painter. And he winds up finding a home in Wichita, and you can see him step out a little bit more. You can tell he's getting a little bit more comfortable. And then you throw in Karan Boyd, who comes from a conference to where he ends up being a defensive player of the year. And you can tell he's athletic. He can get to the rim. Can he knock down some shots consistently? That's going to be a thing. And right now, 2 games in, TJ Williams, Wichita boy, is really looking good. Coming off a double-double against Prairie View A&M. TJ had the injury last year that prevented him from doing much. Right. And here he is so far this year. I think everyone was wondering, what is his role going to be with this team? Because, my question too, what's his role going to be with this roster? Because it would appear that you have Giles is going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. You have 3-point shooting with Mike Gray coming from Nichols, and you have a Unique who can also shoot as well, transfer from Fresno State. So you got the shooting component there. You have Will Berg, you have Jarrett Valencia, you get a in-conference kid in Bati, formerly of Temple, who's athletic. He just needs more opportunities and more of a shot to do something. So you just look at the roster, and I didn't bring up Drake Kendall from Barton Community College, who is a smaller guard, but you see him and Kenyon together, and there's a nice synergy there to where maybe that could be a potential lineup in the future. So again, where does TJ fall into place? And you see what TJ's been able to do the first couple of games. So it's Prairie View A&M, it's UNC Asheville. I think you look at those two opponents and look at the rest of the schedule and go, well, where are the Power Four games that Wichita State seems to get year after year after year? They're going to wait a little bit for that to happen, but I think that the start has been encouraging to me, and the way that they picked apart Prairie View A&M, that the fact that Kenyon Giles is looking like a preseason second teamer in the American. He's looking every bit of it, and there's a chance he could be a first teamer when it's all said and done. So I think it's been a good start for Wichita State. Just my 2 cents with it. Yeah. I think some people, though, you're never going to see them to be happy with it, but I can see where Paul Mills is looking at this roster thinking, I think we're better than last year. I think you're seeing it, at least early on here in the season. I think you're seeing that this roster is a better roster for Wichita State.
And I think Wichita's in a tough spot from the sense of at any time, like you're at a school where you've got, I don't want to limit it, but predominantly one rooting interest, right? Men's basketball rather than basketball and football to go for, and people sort of plow everything into it. It's an all or nothing kind of principle there, and it's hard to get, if you don't feel like it's going as well as it should be, then you get butthurt about it or whatever it is. But I think you're seeing the same thing this week in Memphis. For what feels like the umpteenth time, Memphis is probably not in contention any longer without some help for a conference title in football, and they feel like they got the taste of going to the Cotton Bowl under Mike Norvell 2019, and they feel like. Ryan Silverfield, hey, you had a true freshman starter at quarterback, started 4 years, and got a good transfer quarterback this year, and still has managed, depending on which side of the telescope you look from, has managed to lose a couple of games he wasn't supposed to lose, and now you're on the outside looking in for the conference championship picture, and that might be the case even if you win 9, 10, 11 games over the course of the year, including the bowl game. So it is hard. Sustaining the level is hard. Once you've had that, that champagne taste, even just for a moment. So we'll see if they can rebound. But I do think you'll get some answers maybe against like a Boise State if you're Wichita State. St. Mary's I think up there on the calendar. We'll see.
Yeah. Chicago's another one coming up, and then that's the next one for Wichita State. Yeah, Boise State's you brought up, and then you get to the tournament for Thanksgiving. I think there is some potential there that could be a good learning curve for them.
Yeah, we'll see. And I think Penny Hardaway is going to learn a lot tomorrow against Chris Beard and Ole Miss because they've had that game circled. They got the game after that circled. Against Josh Pastner, who used to coach Memphis, now UNLV. So I mean, they got their work cut out for them again after a great year and just a bad injury at the wrong time last season, kind of torpedoed what they felt like they were able to do in the NCAA tournament. So we'll see. I think I think there's still a lot of good on the table left for Penny Hardaway as long as he can get like his typical high volume, high scoring point guard, right? A Doug McDaniel or a Kendrick Davis or whoever it happens to be in that particular year, PJ Haggerty going, them plus one has been a good combination. They just got to find out who that is. So we'll see. But all eyes on Memphis on the Ole Miss game tomorrow for sure. Okay, this is the last one I'll do because you don't have all night. But is it more reasonable expectations? Chiefs. Wichita State. Because it feels like every year if Patrick Mahomes can't have a good season if he doesn't go to the conference championship game, right? Like that's which is its own bar. And I again, it's not as though they haven't proven they have those people in house and they keep those people in house. But that's a tall mountain to start at the bottom of every year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's as someone who does a show on a regular basis in Wichita. After the Bills game, we were just talking about all sorts of things. And then I had a guest on Tuesdays, Matt Derrick, who's a dear friend of mine for ChiefsDigest.com. And Matt and I were because trade deadline was that day. And what made this trade deadline way different than the rest of the Chiefs. In the city of Wichita, a guy by the name of Brees Hall in Northwest High School, Iowa State, now with the Jets. The Jets are having a fire sale. Come on, Chiefs. Make it happen. Go and bring Brees Hall to Kansas City. The jersey sales for Brees Hall would just go through the roof in Wichita. You wouldn't be able to find a jersey probably. Yeah. And then the offseason arrives, and he probably would just walk because he's an unrestricted free agent. And the amount of people on that text line are just like, okay, so what I'm hearing is you just rest on your laurels, and I'm just like, no, like I'm not getting that. But what people fail to understand, and again, look at the NFL this past weekend. What did the Buffalo Bills do? They end up losing
Miami,
yes, to the Miami Dolphins, where they have a head coach who I thought would be fired, but hasn't been fired. But like the Colts struggled, and like you see the NFL. Do you feel confident in anyone in the NFL right now? The Broncos they feel fraudulent because of the amount of one-score games that they have won. And in some ways, they should be 9-1 if it wasn't for that call against the Colts there on an attempted field goal. So the Colts and Broncos record could be a little bit different just based on that one game. But you look at the entire NFL, and there's no one that is really dominant. But despite the fact the Chiefs are 5-4 coming off the loss to the Bills, if you look at ESPN's FBI, what do they say? Chiefs are the number one team in the NFL. And people are like, oh, there's just no way. But people just tend to forget very, very quickly about just how there's this thing called a salary cap. And you look at the Chiefs, and this isn't Madden. You can't force trade with a team so you get the best player. You have to worry about dollars and cents. And if you're Brett Veach, okay, they have made it pretty clear that there is I guess I should say they don't value running backs, but their viewing of running backs are, I think, I think they're along the lines of what everyone else in the NFL really thinks of running backs. And that is, you can probably get one in round 5, round 6, and probably can make it work. That's what they're hoping for with Isaiah Pacheco. But you've seen them also do these pickups. In previous years, they bring in Le'Veon Bell a few years back. Oh, he's the missing piece. Doesn't happen. Oh, LaShawn McCoy, yeah, shady, reminding Andy Reid's going to be great. Now he talks mad smack on the Chiefs and didn't do anything for the Kansas City Chiefs. They're bringing Ronald Jones, formerly of Tampa Bay, for $5 million, and everyone's thinking, oh, there you go. There's the piece. And it doesn't happen. So, like, the Chiefs. What's that? Oh, yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Yeah, of course, the first-round draft pick. And, like, you look at what they've done, and they haven't gotten any running back production. They went with a first-round pick, didn't pan out. They go with a 7th-round pick, gets banged up in Isaiah Pacheco and also Brashard Smith. They end up going with these mid-season pickups or late-season pickups, and nothing has panned out. So if I'm Brett Veach, do I look at Brees Hall and go, okay, I can bring that guy in. He'll be an unrestricted free agent. Now, his contract's not going to be as expensive as you probably think it's going to be the offseason, but you got to pay the dude. Well, who's also coming up for a contract extension? A guy by the name of Trent McDuffie. Do you see anyone else? Do you see anyone else in the secondary that you trust? I look at the second cornerback spot. You really want to treat Trent McDuffie like L'Jarius Sneed and trade him away for a second-round draft pick, because you're probably not going to get a lot out of him. L'Jarius Sneed, there wasn't much when it came to that trade. So you could do that, but you don't have a promising pass rush. That needs some help. You have a safeties group that also needs some help. So I don't know. I think I have one sure thing on defense, and that one sure thing is Trent McDuffie. That guy's probably going to get paid like Sauce Gardner. He's probably going to get paid that way. And then, oh, by the way, a guy by the name of Rashee Rice can also get a contract extension who, if Travis Kelce, if this is the final year for Travis Kelce, then there's some leftover money to where you can use that for for Trent McDuffie, but also you can use that for Rashee Rice, who's probably going to be force-fed all the time when it comes to targets. So, 5-4, oh my gosh, it's the worst team in the world. Did you ever think that maybe Brett Veach looks at the rest of the league and go, heck, I don't know. I think this roster is probably good enough to get the job done. And I've seen worse rosters that they've had, and they found a way to win Super Bowls with them. So, it's amazing how people look at the Chiefs. And again, it is like up there. If you don't go 17-0, then something is drastically wrong with the Kansas City Chiefs. But for the first time, though, the difference is this time, though, is they're outside looking in the division. And if they don't end up beating the Denver Broncos on the road, you don't want to label a game as a must-win in Week 10 in the NFL. But I think it's something you can definitely discuss and definitely go, that game will decide who's going to win the division championship. And that's obviously your best way to get into the postseason. So, but right now, I think the Chiefs are at like 75% to make the playoffs. That's still pretty high for a team that's 5-4 in the NFL, because I think people understand their offensive line at some point is going to get healthy. Josh Simmons is officially back in the fold. You hope that he can, continue to develop and be a solid left tackle of the future for Kansas City. You just hope that you get improvements in some other areas. You hope that Isaiah Pacheco can get back to the way he was, or maybe Brashard Smith finally is given the baton there for the Chiefs. Maybe they slow play them like they do in Andy Reid fashion, slow play a rookie, and then you finally unleash them. So as you can see, we spent a little bit of time in Wichita talking about this. Don't get me wrong, Breece Hall in a Chiefs uniform would be sick, but again, he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year, and if you end up going after him and you're throwing more money at a position, well, everyone yelled about Trey Smith getting a contract extension at right guard because, well, that position of all things, you're paying that much money for right guard. Hey, I'm right there with you, because I am one of those individuals that also said, yeah, I don't know if I would have gone that route. That's just my personal opinion, because right guard's not really one of those positions you really want to lock down. Same can be said about tailbacks, people. It's very much the same thing. I had one guy say that Breece Hall Breece Hall is our Jamal Charles. I'm like, y'all need to go back and watch Jamal, because I love Breece Hall. He's amazing, but Jamal Charles is an amazing person.
Jamal Charles has receipts, man. He has receipts.
I'm just saying it. Like, it's amazing. So I don't know. I think back to the actual question, expectations. I think the expectations are just through the roof in the Midwest, Tyler. Just all it is. Everyone expected Kansas to make a big jump. Everyone expected Kansas State to win a Big 12 championship. Now both teams might not make a bowl season. And then KU basketball, of course, starts off with that loss to North Carolina. People freaking out about that. So, like, the expectations they're just higher in the Midwest. I don't know what it is. They're just higher in the Midwest.
Well, I think some of it is it's success born, which is a good thing, right? Yeah. But as a guy who grew up in Baltimore as a Ravens fan and an Orioles fan, and has watched the Royals do a number on the Orioles at some point in the past decade in the playoffs, and has watched the Chiefs do what the Chiefs do for a while. I can tell you, I don't know if I can speak for the AFC, but I will. I don't care if I see the Chiefs at home or on the road. I'm still concerned. I'm still bothered, right? I don't care if they're in as a wild card. There's the 7th team in the playoffs, right? I don't want to see that team on the other side. I don't want to see Patrick Mahomes on the other side, no matter what. So until they have proven themselves to be, incompetent in a playoff atmosphere, I'll withhold judgment on whatever happens in the regular season for that. That's, I think, because. And by the way, I know what it's like to lose a quarterback in addition to like about 90 other defensive players on this team this year. And people basically canceled the Ravens seasons in about week 4. And now, like you said, because there's no good teams, especially in the AFC North, there's the opportunity is still on the table, right? So it's a long game, man. It's just too long of a season to just fold up the shop when you're in week 9, you're 5-4. I guess it is different staring up at, Kansas City, or staring up at Denver and the Chargers for a change. But again, you guys have been there. They haven't, right? And you're not going to convince me that Bo Nix is going to do better in the playoffs. Like if it's all on his shoulders rather than Patrick Mahomes. I want to see it first. So,
right. Absolutely. No, I mean, there's only and then here we are talking about the team at the top. You get New England with Drake May. Like where's going from? And then you see the Colts. The Colts and Chiefs will be squaring off here before too long. And the Colts, at least with them, you see Jonathan Taylor and just how successful a season he's had. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they're going for it. Yeah. With Sauce Gardner traded for 2 first. I commend that. Now there's a Colts fan in Wichita who works for me, works for us, I should say. I'm not the boss.
Is he thrilled that Ballard's taking the chance, or does he think no, too much?
I didn't have a chance to really talk too much to him about the most recent game, but I think with Sauce, I think he was okay. I should say, let me back up. He wasn't okay with the fact that it was 2 first, but I explained to him, well, at least the Colts are trying. At least they're going for it. At least they understand that this might be your year. Look at the rest of the NFL. Look at the rest of the AFC. This might be the year that we could probably do it, guys. And when you have that type of scenario, guess what? You should probably push your chips in the middle and say, let's go. Let's go try and win a Super Bowl. Let's go do that. So I like the fact that the Colts actually did pull the trigger on Sauce Gardner, because now you have a secondary that's pretty damn good, and you just got to figure out the front 7 aspect, mainly the defensive line, to be more consistent. But you can address that in the offseason too when it's all said and done. If it's not this year, well, you got Sauce Gardner for a little while longer, so you can figure out the rest after the fact.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how it works out. Like you said, big expectations in Indy there, right? And they've only just come up like that. They're like, oh, it's the best we've done since Andrew Luck, or or maybe even better than that, honestly. But we'll see. There'll be plenty to pick apart here before we even probably get into conference play for American men's and women's basketball. But it'll be fun. As just a throwaway aside, as a person who graduated from a Division III college, I'm pulling for Kansas on the football side, because Lance Leopold was a Kansas guy. But I know it's tough because
you are ripping off a Band-Aid, my man. I thought the scab was healed and everything's fine. I didn't have a chance to do my show today because we were traveling, and the best way to describe it is it's Kansas football, Tyler. It's Kansas football. Them losing to Arizona the way that they did, it's just Kansas football. That's what it is. As a guy who's one of 4 of my family that graduate from KU, it's the same story over and over and over again. And I've talked to Coach Leipold, and I admire what he's done. But man, I tend to, I tell people all the time when you get in this industry where your fandom just kind of slowly goes down, because as someone who has a closet filled with Wichita State gear and Kansas State gear, it's weird to say that, but it's true, because I help out with 2 of those schools, and then the other one obviously was my alma mater. Right. So I just look at being this guy of I don't have that reaction that I used to when I was growing up. For the first time this past week, I think I finally felt like a fan. I was like, okay, I'm not happy. I'm very displeased with what I saw, because even in the Sunflower Showdown, it's like, okay, fine, whatever. They've lost to Kansas State. They've always lost to Kansas State. No big deal. Now, I want them to do better, obviously, but they've always lost to Kansas State, whatever. And then that game against Arizona, where bowl eligibility is on line, and it's just, you dropped so many pick sixes, and you get a holding call on a pick 6 that you actually score on, but you get called back, and then Arizona scores, and it's Kansas football, Tyler. Just the way it is. It's Kansas football. No matter who's running it, it's just Kansas football, unfortunately. Now, it's not like we're back to my sophomore year in college where you couldn't pay me enough to go and be in the stands to be a football fan. But good night. It's it's harder when you do expect the bowl games and you're like, it's right there, like just right there, go get it, and now you got to go earn it. But I would argue the hard way in the next 2 games to wrap up the regular season.
That's a tough ending route with Iowa State and with Utah. That's no peach. And I pitched this to somebody and I think I said I was going to let Pat go about 25 minutes ago, but I pitched it before this even all started, the whole carousel. I said, well, basically at the beginning of it, when James Franklin got canned, I said, what James Franklin needs to drive to, like, basically drive to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and meet at a truck stop with Brian Kelly and just have each other flip keys, right? Just switch places and see if anything happens differently or any better for those two fan bases. I'll pitch you on the same thing, okay? Unfortunately, it's like we thought we're gonna get one in the upswing, and it looks like it's either tapered off or it's about to go down. But if Lance Leipold meets in, well, let's call it Bowling Green, Kentucky, okay, with Mike Loxley, right? And Loxley gets the Kansas keys and Leipold gets the Maryland keys. Would either side do better? Would either side be happier? I don't know. It's tough. They're both in tough spots.
It's a fair question. Yeah, it's a fair question. And that's, I think the way you view Coach Leipold is the floor rose. The floor rose to where it's not expecting 8 loss seasons on the regular, 8-9 losses on the regular. Now you feel like you can actually compete for a bowl game every year. But like most things, you want to see more. And I think, especially in the Midwest and Kansas, you want more because you see Texas Tech go out there and just shell out all this money to load up their roster. And then you see them do what they do. You see BYU. It's like, well, hold on. BYU just got into the conference. Why are they doing so well? You see Arizona State last year, what they did. And you're seeing these newcomers right off the bat having instant success. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. I thought we were the ones who had the opportunity to make this big jump. But I do think in Lawrence, it is challenging because you do have such a really good men's basketball program, a blue blood program. And, a new stadium can do a lot of things. New facilities can do a lot of things for the football program. But still, you still run into the challenge of it still being Kansas. It's still Kansas football. And I don't know what it looks like from an NIL perspective across the way. Now, look, $300 million gift from David Booth, and $75 million of that is going to complete the stadium. Great, fantastic. What happens with the other 225? I don't know, but I would say the other 225, if you can figure out a way to make it work, the pay-to-play situation, then okay, then maybe you have some sparks that can fly. You've seen some instant success, but the fact you still have to share with men's basketball, and of course the other programs, but men's basketball in particular, it's hard because it feels like you can't be amazing at both. You have to almost pick one or the other. And for KU, you kind of feel like you want to be men's basketball, but you got to respect football because, by golly, people have been wanting it for so long. So it's a tough spot, man. It's a tough spot to be in for sure there at Kansas.
For our next podcast, you and I will both come to the table with a yet undiscovered church congregation that has deep pockets, or a yet undiscovered oil well that has just bottomless reserves in each of our respective states, because it seems like that's what you need one of these days if you want to get up and good in a hot second. Pat Strathman, always a joy. Excited to talk to you along the way, and hope for good things for all the teams that you work with, and just in general for the people who listen to your show, and those who don't, and those who say they don't but actually do, just for their lives to improve and their teams to improve, so that those two things can go, together, and thus your life improves, hopefully, as a host.
Well, it is what it is. I don't mind the fact that you have the highs and lows, because that's what makes it fun. It's sports, man. Like it's the highs and lows. You're not going to be able to have this high forever. It's bound to change, and when it does, then it's fun for me to unpack it and to try to see both sides, and for you to pick one side or the other. That's just kind of my rule. It's the almost be like a fence rider in some ways, But I don't know. I think it's still exciting there in Kansas, and I know it has been that good of a year for football just in general. But it's also it hasn't been this way for a long, long time. And gotta say, like the last couple of years, at least it felt good, right? So just hanging on to the fact that maybe it can all change, because in sports it can all change in a hurry. We've seen that happen before. So Tyler, it's always a pleasure, and hopefully when we meet up, it will be two teams that have figured some things out, and it can end up being a great showdown. Hopefully, you don't knock down 15 threes again like last year in El Marone Fieldhouse. So, but I appreciate the time as always, and looking forward to doing it again sometime.
Likewise, and I can guarantee this. I do not expect a Memphis team that will lead the league in 3-point shooting, thanks in large part to that game and the game they had against Tulane. But you never know, right? It's this whole thing's a whole kettle of fish that we don't know what it's going to look like when it's fully cooked. So, but as always, I appreciate you, and thanks to those of you who tuned in and catch the replay as well. We'll be chatting to you along the way on Springs Time.